You know what's hard with this category is it's almost like, you know, you buy your whitetail habitat property, you buy your whitetail hunting grounds, and there's an endless list of chores that you can do and complete on it. And we try to help you with a monthly chores list of what we're doing here and what we're doing on our whitetail grounds. And ultimately, I'm trying to create the best hunt I can have, the best herd I can have, and the best wildlife property I can have, all in locations where I can actually move around the property and enjoy it. You know, for example, we're on this property shooting videos and hiking and walking around the property about 9 months out of the year. The deer season's 3 months out of the year. So we really slow down, of course, during the deer season. But I want pheasant on this property. My property will be the #1 pheasant property in the area. I can guarantee you that. My property will be the #1 property with birds, butterflies, and bees and pollinators in the area. I can guarantee that. We'll have the most rabbits on this property. And for that, we'll have the most whitetails. And that's why I talk about that. You know, I'm talking about mixes here in a second, but if you think whitetail, which is edge, cover, and food, and diversity, then you're going to be the most encompassing of all whitetail species, regardless of what your focus is on various bucks, various does, buck age structure, anything. You have to build it habitat-wise on private land appropriately and not waste your time in order to actually achieve your goals. And that's what I see. There's so many time wasters out there. And we'll talk about, you know, mixes. Let's get into that right away. Because there's a lot of mixes that are basically marketed as do-all mixes. And I'm meaning mixes that are bedding cover for deer, for pheasants, for quail, for birds, for butterflies, bees, pollinators, birds, you know, songbirds, whatever it might be. There's these mixes that say this is going to do it all, and folks, that's just not the case. A lot of the pheasant mixes, we drove by today, hundreds of acres of, quote, pheasant mixes. I know someone that has literally planted thousands of pheasants in those areas and they're all dead because there's no cover. No cover. If there's no cover for pheasants and rabbits, there's no cover for deer. If there's no cover for deer in those open areas, there's no cover for pheasants or rabbits. You see that relationship there. If you hit that for whitetails, you're going to hit it for your small game species. And that's why I say the sign of a great whitetail parcel also includes great small game species. Because if you don't have small game species, and this could be up in the northern section of wilderness area where you have a lot of aspen, you're going to have grouse. Because you have early successional growth and regeneration of grouse, aspen, that's what grouse need. They need certain ages and stands of grouse and varying ages stands to actually live and have a population and sustainable population. So if you're in our area, ag country, we're going to have pheasant, we're going to have rabbits. And we're going to do that because we have enough edge. And we're not putting one mix that actually lays down all fall. Because if you don't have enough cover in the mix and it lays down during the wintertime, you didn't accomplish anything. And that's I teach over and over and over again, that if you're going to do it right. And so that's where you have to have that cover, whether it's shrubs mixed in, or of course, if we have good standing, strong switchgrass like we use cave and rock in this area. I've heard there's some good Canadian varieties that are coming out through Northwoods whitetail, so that's really cool. But bottom line is, if you don't have those solid blocks of switchgrass adjacent to those solid blocks of pollinator blend, then you're not going to have enough cover for deer, rabbits, pheasants. You already have, if you have pollinator blends, you have good pollinator blends for those pollinators, or birds, butterflies, bees. But bottom line is, there's so many mixes out there. And what you end up doing is you plant this mix, doesn't hold anything, doesn't promote any small game. It lays down all winter long, like this stuff that we drove by just within a few miles of the house here today that we see all winter long, holding no cover. And then you want something different. And so you just wasted 5 years, 10 years. I know people that literally have wasted 10 years with native grass blends that all lay down, thinking it's going to get better every single year, and they're just beating their head against the wall for 7 years or 10 years. Then we come out and say, you know what, you can leave this area. It's got some pollinators in it, some flowers, some forbs, forages, and then you can surround it with switchgrass pockets. Now you have that structure of cover in there, and you'll actually be able to hold wildlife. It's a huge time waster. We see that all the time. I've seen 40-acre fields. Around here, we have some 80 to 100, 120-acre fields that are all in those mixes that absolutely do nothing. And it's unfortunate. There's a better way. And I'm not even talking about money in this. I'm just talking about your time, wasting years and years. This stuff should happen within a couple years on your land. Good whitetail habitat and good wildlife habitat planning takes place in a couple years. And if someone's telling you it takes 7, 8, 10 years to develop, they're leading you down a wrong path, because it can happen a lot shorter if you do it right. Number 2, road planting of trees and shrubs. I've seen fields, 20 acres, be road planting of pines, road planting of trees, road planting of shrubs. The bad thing about that is there's a Minnesota grouse study I saw in the early 90s. They talked about this one on my tree order form in Tuscola County, Michigan. So I'm ordering trees, and right on the back of the tree order form it said grouse populations were increased 24 times by staggering trees and not planting in rows. It decreased warfare, predation, and disease among wildlife species. The reason for that is, look down a road, it's stressful. You can see other game birds, you can see other animals. Predators can more easily go in and take out populations when they have rows to run down. So everything should always be staggered. But on top of that, if you're taking a 20-acre field that you want to have bedding area and cover for all wildlife species, why are you planting big monoculture in there? It'd be no better if you're planting all switch, all conifers, all shrubs. You want pockets of cover. And I couldn't get cost share assistance back in 95, 96 when we bought our first acreage in the Thumb area, because I saw that's what held the most wildlife. I wanted to plant in pockets. They said, well, in order to get cost share assistance, you have to plant in rows, because that's what creates the most timber dollars and boards per foot. And if the state's going to give you cost share, they want those dollars back in the form of revenue for timber. I wanted wildlife, so it's a completely different focus for what I wanted. I wanted pockets, I wanted diversity, I wanted edge, I wanted whitetail habitat, which in turn gave me small game habitat. Road trees, a lot of times you're taking 20 acres, maybe 40% of that can be planted in trees, but staggered. Make sure they're not in rows, so you're not decreasing the wildlife value. And then those other portions should be random. It's back to early successional growth. If you have conifers that are 3-4 foot tall and blocking out the rest of the field and you can't see into it, then that early successional growth within that provides food for pollinators, pollinator blends, flowers, forbs, forages, whatever it might be. Then you have that perfect mix of browse in those locations and cover in the conifer. But even a step better than that, so a lot of times you can take an old field like we're doing around here. We have switchgrass that's already 6 foot tall in 1 year. Let alone, we're going to do this. We have about 9 acres of switchgrass, and we're adding more because we purchased a new property. We'll probably have 12, 13 acres of switchgrass altogether by next year. And the new stuff will be 3-4 feet tall by the end of the year. But all the old stuff we have, about 9 acres, is going to be 6 foot tall plus. And it's already providing cover for pheasants and rabbits. And then we have our pollinator blends next to it and early successional growth alongside that. So we have great edge going into the woods with early successional growth and upland cover. Then imagine that going to switchgrass, and then imagine that going to long strips of pollinator blends with forbs and forages and flowers. Different weeds that come in at different times, or different types of goldenrod that mature at different times of the year in the growing season. Then you have the solid portions of switch for ultimate cover. Then you have the pollinator blends, then you have the early successional growth. That's so much better, and you can get away with planting 1/10 as many trees then. So you're planting pockets of trees. We're putting pockets, we have pockets of aspen growing right up here by the house. But you have pockets of trees. You can do that with seeds. You can do that with seeds of box elder, red maple. You're looking again for wildlife diversity. That can be accomplished by planting a lot fewer trees and certainly not in rows. Number 3, shaded bedding areas. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a property, and maybe this sounds foreign to you, but creating hinge cuts under the canopy of mature trees, those hinge cuts just die and they're just dried out and dead within 2 or 3 years. The reason those trees were so skinny and tall and hingeable was because they're almost stunted. Their diameter is small. They're just trying to reach the sun. They're barely surviving, and then you cut them. Now, instead of them being 25 feet tall and hitting little bits of sun, they're down on the ground in total shade and they die. And I've been to a lot of properties where people have paid good money to have that done. And that could even extend to red cedar. I've seen red cedar being hinge cut. That's a very bad practice, just simply because deer can't walk through it, of course. It stays there forever, but it's not regenerating. It's not generating any kind of food, and it's still putting shade on the ground, so nothing's growing under it either to allow sunlight to actually fully hit the ground, and it doesn't continue to live. So you're better off just cutting it out, letting sunlight hitting the ground, making it more easy for deer to move through. The bottom line is shaded bedding area cuttings is so critical. The first thing you start with in a bedding like we did last year is removed canopy. So we focus on undesirables, twisted, weak, leaning trees, undesirable species. Like aspen around here, we can cut large, mature aspen clusters, get sunlight to the ground. We're not hinge cutting those, we're just cutting them off completely. Maybe some old oaks, just because it's an oak doesn't mean it's a good oak. If it's not a mass producer, if it's twisted and ugly, get it down on the ground, let sunlight come, regeneration take place, and that gives cover to all wildlife species, including deer. Deer need side cover, not canopy cover. So many people wasting time on hinge cuts, and I hinge cut last year on the property, but it's opportunistic. I'm getting the canopy down first and then hinge cutting to complement that canopy removal. And even if you have all hingeable size regeneration, let's say it's 4 to 7, 8 inches in diameter, then you focus on pockets of cutting instead of large areas. So you can get away with small pockets of cutting, a 1/4 acre here per every 2-3 acres, a 1/4 acre there. Put them in specific locations that match corridors or travel routes or inside corners, funnels that you expect deer to travel on from food to bedding, so that you can further set up deer locations. And that leads me to number 4, random improvements. All your improvements should relate to each other. Every improvement is designed to promote daylight deer travel from point A to point B. That means bedding area in the afternoon to food source in the evening. So anything that complements that is perfect. In between, if you're putting a water hole in between bedding and a evening food source. If deer are bedded dry all day, they hit the water hole, then they go to food. Don't put the water hole in the food source. The deer are already going there. You're wasting an opportunity for a stand location. Let alone travel corridors, just random, going to the middle of your property, bringing deer to the outside and then potentially off your property. That's why I always talk about paralleling habitat features that parallel the borders of your land. So they keep deer on your property instead of going from the center out or from the outside in, because that just pushes deer on and off. I was at a habitat day a long time ago, 2-acre field. Let's say it was 200 yards long, 50 yards wide, and I have to do the math. That might not be accurate, but the bottom line is that field was positioned lengthwise 30 yards from the border, so it's pointing deer perpendicularly right at the border, and the neighbor had to stand 30 yards across the fence. And the landowner's complaining, and that guy, I came out here on opening day of gun season, I'm running my chainsaw, basically harassing the hunter, and he set up that problem because deer come out of the cover options on either side, they hit that food, they turn left or right. If they turn left from one side, took them off the property. If they turn right from the other side, took them off the property. They had 2 choices, go left or right. 50% of the time they went the wrong way, went off the property, went to that guy's stand location. What a smart hunter on the neighbor's property. Instead, flip that around so it connects bedding area to bedding area, and it funnels deer parallel to your borders to keep them on your borders instead of going off your borders. That's just one example. When you're coming into a stand location, it should be perpendicular access to your movements, meaning bedding area on the left, bedding area on the right. You're coming in between like a barbell. You're hitting that location. Great spot for a stand location. Everything you do is designed to keep deer on your property and then let them go out off your property after dark. Dylan and I are going to sit in a spot right now where we routinely watch deer come out of their bedding areas, feed on a high quality food source. When it gets dark, they cross the fields to go somewhere else. I love seeing that because by the time they get anywhere else, they're not getting shot at. That allows us to advance the buck age structure, improve sex ratios, and if we want to shoot does, we need to balance the population, then we can do so because we control the daylight movement, not the nighttime. I could really care less if they're a mile away on a cornfield, they're in the middle of the night, as long as they're staying back home during the daylight in and around the land that we can hunt and we can control. Nothing random, everything planned. Making sure that you're not setting yourself up for access issues. You build a bedding area, this is a great spot for a bedding area, but if you have to walk through it, it's not a great spot, no matter what the habitat is. Great spot for a food plot. Nice and open, good soil, but if you have to walk through it every time you hunt, really, really, really bad spot. So think about that. Does your improvements allow you to get on and off your property without spooking deer? Do your improvements allow you to get on and off the property like a predator, to be able to actually hunt and get in there? We even have an edge area out here. If we wanted to hunt small game out here in October, maybe pheasants out in our fields right by the house, we could do so, or on that edge. The bottom line is, we hunted rabbits last year, we go hiking, we do everything we want. During the hunting season, we tailor everything so that we can get and move around the property without spooking deer. We can hold deer in pockets and everything planned, nothing random. Number 5, overzealous invasive control. What I mean by that is, I've seen red cedar eradication programs on 40 acres where they just go in and cut every red cedar, remove it, and it's not even invasive, and then they'll tree tube hardwoods across that entire 40 acres. 5 years later, the trees have hardly grown or they're dead, and you have nothing. Where you had the beautiful base of red cedar. Instead, in that 40 acres, take that 40 acres red cedar, leave the entire outside, maybe 100 feet wide, 120 feet wide, whatever it is. Go inside, remove 60% of it in pockets. Spot spray, make sure red cedars never come into those areas. Let early successional growth happen. Plant hardwoods, regeneration, shrubs, grasses, something different than the red cedar so that you have that ultimate level of diversity. Your red cedar is your base cover, no different than switchgrass in a field. It's the same concept. Here's your field. And then within that field, you have that thick edge that's protecting. Doesn't matter if it's a 5 acre field, 10 acre field. And then you have whatever this thick edge is, red cedar, pines, spruce, shrubs, switchgrass. Can't be just some native grass that lays down all year because then there's no cover. Then you leave pockets in here. Whatever kind of design you want to make, whatever it is. And then the rest of this is early successional growth. It's actual, that daytime browse, pollinator blends for various wildlife species, but it's all browse and food for deer and other wildlife so that you can have that ultimate level of diversity and maximum wildlife potential on your land. If you planted this all in switchgrass, you wouldn't have it. If you planted it all in hardwoods, if you planted it all in red cedar, in shrubs, you're not going to have that. So when it comes to invasives, a lot of people, I just talked to someone this morning on a comment, they were talking about that their property is so brush choked that deer can't even move through it. So they're going to get a machine in there. When I hear that, I just think, I just picture them as taking 20 acres and mowing it all down and planting something else. What a waste of time. Because you can go in there and take out pockets. Now the deer have the cover. You can allow those pockets to grow up in something desirable that you want, even native regeneration, spot spraying out invasives. You keep that in whatever you want. Maybe you want to replace it with conifer, whatever you want to do. And then when that's actually forming and creating cover, you can slowly change the outside, maybe put a switchgrass border around it so you actually have wildlife. But again, you don't need to remove everything and wait 10 years for this to happen. You can use what you have and create it, plan ahead, think of the big picture, and actually create diversity so that you have diversity for all wildlife. And that's what I teach all the time. I love talking about big bucks and how to hunt big bucks because that's the lowest hole in the bucket. It doesn't matter if a big buck in your area is a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old or a 6-year-old. Bottom line is that's the lowest hole in the bucket. That's the hardest thing. But you can do all of this. It might be that you have 6 people that hunt your 40 acres. Then you can only do what you can do. You just have fun and enjoy it. But if you want to know what it takes to actually develop high quality herds, high quality wildlife habitat, you can do it all at the same time. We use our property year round. We're out on the property. Dylan and I are shooting videos on the property all the time. Not necessarily during the hunting season. We're not walking out there and doing these things, but as soon as we can cut, we will be in January. This year, something near and dear to my heart is rabbit hunting. I grew up doing that, so we're making some rabbitat out there. We're actually putting some pallets. We're making some rabbit palaces. We're covering them up with brush. We've already collected pallets. I think we have 5 or 6 up in the garage right now. Our goal is 24, so we can make 8 rabbit palaces. And we're going to complement rabbit habitat that's already out there so that these critters have a place to hide. And that just brings me back to my rabbit running days and field trial days back in the day where we were running rabbits in enclosures and the extreme population that they had in those locations because they managed the habitat for rabbits. And boy, some of those spots had some great deer that would actually jump the fence to get in there because they had the diversity to not only attract rabbits, but of course, if you have great diversity for rabbits, pheasants, grouse, you're going to have great whitetails. Again, if you go after the whitetails first, you're going to have great deer habitat. And I just want to make sure that you guys are making accurate decisions when you're going forward. We can talk about rubbing posts, things that, and if you just look at it, a lot of rubs, a deer will visit once for the entire year. That shows you the priority on their level. How many rubs have you seen? It's a giant rub, and they only hit that one time. I'm not saying a rubbing post, they'd only hit once, but the point is, they hit our mock scrapes all year long, and they're free and cheap, and we don't even use any scent, and they don't take much time to install, and they actually are very powerful. Every deer that goes by, we'll visit those. We had deer after a snowstorm, they're going and hitting the licking branches. They don't even make the scrape, but that defines how they move through the area. Rubbing post doesn't. It's a very, there's all kinds of things. You can plant different types of grasses for screening. Talk about the giant Mescampus. Mescampus can be a good fit where you have power lines and you need that height, but it's going to take you, some people tell you it take 2 or 3 years. That's in the optimum prime conditions if you space them correctly and you have 5 rows and they're 1 to 2 foot spacing and it's thick and you have great soils. It might come up in 2 or 3 years where you have a nice 4-foot border. It might take still 5, 6, 7 years to get to that ultimate height that you need. You just need to be realistic for fitting and matching the deer habitat improvement that you have accurately and appropriately for the situation, so you're not wasting your time. There's so many time wasters out there, let alone money wasters, which is an entirely another video that we can shoot too. But I hope you're staying on track this year. That's why we complete our monthly deer chores. You can look back, look at every month and our deer chores that we create. You can notice a lot of those have to do with deer, a lot of those have to do with wildlife or both. But ultimately, it's a lot of fun and a way to keep you on track and not wasting your time this season and for every season and planting season and habitat season beyond. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.